All right, let's get going here. I thought what we should, maybe a way to start would be for each of you to talk about a particular piece that you liked or that moved you or you thought was absurd or whatever. And anyone can start except Larry. So
I'll start. I ended up really liking this book the whole way through. When you first named it and I went in and looked at it at Arcadia, it's not the kind of book I would have ever bought. So I'm glad I'm in a book club that made me read it because I wouldn't have read it otherwise. I thought this is going to take at least 4 weeks for me to get through. I'm not going to do it the last week just before the meeting. So I started the next day, and 3 days later, I was more than halfway through. So I had to put it down again and then wait a little closer so I wouldn't forget everything. But I really enjoyed it. It really captured me at the beginning. I think it got pulled you in and pulled you in until you got to the end. And I got to admit, those last couple of essays on language, which is, I suppose, the whole point of the book, just completely threw me. So I'm going to have to work a little bit on that. Otherwise, my favorite one was by the Native American Robin Wall Kimmerer.
Oh,
Speaking of nature,
yeah.
You always hear that Native Americans have this special relationship to nature and how they approach life. I think this is the first time somebody ever explained that approach to life to me so clearly that I finally got it. So just for that chapter alone, I thought it was really good.
Yeah. Well,
that was my take on the book.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I think the last couple of chapters, I mean, they're pretty challenging. I agree. Have you, you know, Robin Wall Kimmerer is the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, which is a book that we sell probably 2 copies of a week and have for the last, what, Nancy, 3 years or 4 years? And
ever since it's been out.
Yeah, it just sells and sells and sells. 2 people have sent me that book, even though they know you know, I own a bookstore. And, you know, one of them writing a card that says, "I know I'm delivering coals to Newcastle, but you know, if you don't know the book, you have to." Yeah, she's quite a remarkable writer, and that's a really lovely essay. But and that's not part of that book. It's you know, it's a different. You know, so I'm glad you brought that up. Anybody else like that? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Something just happened to my. Something's going on with my power here. Sorry, just a second.
Well, we can see and hear you, so.
Oh, you can? Okay.
Yep.
Oh, weird. Nancy, take over. I have to crawl under my desk to replug something.
Okay. So yeah, so what Robin Wall Kimmerer also has a book called Gathering Moss. So it's like this. It's like a collection of essays. So something you don't have to read straight through. You can pick up and put down and just. I know a lot of people read them like it's their bedtime story kind of thing. Just pick up an essay, and it's just kind of a lovely way to end the day. Diane, were you the one that was going to speak up?
Not yet. I've marked 10 different places in the book, so I'm gonna figure out which one I want to talk about. So let somebody else go.
Okay, no, I'm sorry.
I could.
Was Mary Pat? Okay.
I could share which one was my favorite. I liked the Catalpa Tree by Amy, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce her last name, on page 135. Yeah, that one really spoke to me. I loved, she talked about she and her younger sister being dropped off at the state hospital. And I think what I liked about it, I liked her sentiment, especially when she talked about her being a teacher and how she kind of brought the trees full circle, but also the little things like she talks about them letting themselves into the doctor's office. And I went, well, this doesn't make sense. Who's the doctor? Why are they there? You know, she had all little things like that. And then all of a sudden you have to keep reading and you go, oh, her mother's the doctor. So she tells her story kind of in bits and pieces, which I don't know. I just really liked, and I love the way she brought it from being a 6-year-old to being a grown-up. And I just thought her writing was just really beautiful. And then the other one that I just wanted to say, just because it so struck me, and now I'm trying to find the place in it. It was just part of the story, Among the Trees by Carl Phillips. I had no idea who he was. And so as I was reading, so no idea, did not know that he was a Black man, I knew nothing about him. So as I read, I'm reading this story this person wrote, but I just loved the way he tells the story about how he was climbing out of the tree as a little boy and got stuck hanging from his underwear in the tree. And his father came and rescued him, but said, you know, I should leave you up there for disobeying us and not coming in when your parents are calling you. And then he kind of has the afterthought about, I wonder if my father thought anything about the irony of my hanging by a tree and Black men being lynched.
Okay.
I just thought that was a beautiful moment. And at that point was when I looked up who he was, because I went, okay, clearly he's a Black man. And I wanted to find out more, and then discovered that, oh my goodness, I should know who he is. Poetry and Pulitzer Prizes and everything.
He won the Pulitzer Prize this year for After the War. It's a really
Yeah.
great book. Really, really, really good book. Yeah, I love that piece too. Mostly because there was an apple tree in our yard that I climbed all the time, and my mother was frequently throwing rakes at me and things to try to get me out. And then finally decided, if I just leave him up there, my grocery bill will be reduced by 40%. So, you know, that just so.
Yeah, I have to, just the last thing I'll say, and then somebody else can share theirs, is I loved, as both of those stories.
We lost.
Or stories, I really liked those that were more stories as opposed to the pieces that got very scientific and you know, into the minutia of trees and the biology. And I found those less interesting. And actually several of them actually would get halfway through, and some of them I went, oh, I didn't have the energy sometimes to really read and understand all the biology. And I went, you know, that's okay. I'm a grown-up. I can skip this and go to the next one.
Well, I think that's part of the beauty of the book, is that you don't feel like you have to, you know, if something feels too much for you, just go to the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that about it. And the art is so beautiful all the way through, that it just, you know, it just keeps making you think about looking, which I love.
Yeah. It was also so rich, and I can add next on to what Mary Pat said. Ironically, normally I would feel the same way, that I would prefer the narrative of a story, but I was intrigued by a lot of the ones that had a science element to them, and the one about the guy, the fractals guy, and you know, that's not my language, but it is interesting to think about in different ways. But I think the whole book itself just seemed so like loamy and rich, and just like really rich soil with lots of stuff in it. And I mean, I don't know that I have a favorite, because they were so different and evoked really different feelings in me the different writers, but I do love Ross Gay. And it's interesting because I think his Book of Delights is sort of, like this. And I expected it to be sort of light and frivolous, and it really wasn't. All those pieces were rich too, but I liked, he had one in the center, Joy is Such a Human Madness, and it was the duff between us. And I didn't know what duff is, and duff is sort of that detritus, loamy soil, the stuff on the forest floor. And I just like, and that just this whole piece, it just kind of reminded me of, well, James, you've got your Kunitz poem that you love, that live in the layers, not in the litter. It kind of reminds me of that. I don't know if I'm reading that wrong, but I always see that as in the layers of, I see layers of leaves, and so that one just evoked a lot of that for me. And he talked about the things going on underneath in the roots. And I've been in a writer's workshop where they've been talking a lot about the philosopher Deleuze, and he has theories of rhizomatic knowledge gathering, or arboreal, rhizomatic being, underneath the ground with no set point of origin and incoming, versus arboreal, a tree, and just it emanates out from this one, it builds on like a father idea. And it just kind of captured for me a lot of the connectedness that the book made me feel about all of us, with not only each other, but obviously the earth. So yeah, but there were just lots of like Diana, lots of things I highlighted and that wouldn't remember, but I would like to go back because there were just a lot of interesting things. And like the first speaker, not one I would have chosen on my own, but I'm glad to have read it.
Cool. Next, anybody? Who's next?
I can go next. Yeah, like I said, I marked like 10 different ones that I really loved, but I'll
You
just kind of,
can talk about more than one. That's fine.
well, I'll highlight 3. I loved the one about the moringa tree in Africa, because it was just so hopeful that, because we hear so much and we focus so much on, just all the negative things that are going on, and, and the poverty and the hunger and the famine and everything. And then here's this tree that, they say it's a small and simple tree, and it's like a miracle tree because of its nutritional value. And so they're starting to plant these trees and talking about, all the nutritional value of it. And that the last sentence, with the moringa tree in abundance, along with their year-round vegetable gardens, it is possible that their grandchildren and their grandchildren's children would have a better chance at life. There was hope. So I loved that one. And the science one, this one's very different. This was the one about the guy with the fake trees that could absorb 1,000 times as much carbon dioxide. I thought that one was super cool.
Yeah, I was surprised, when I read that, I thought, that book that not Elizabeth Colbert, but the other woman, oh crap, my brain is horrible. But the book that she wrote recently, this other woman writer, about these issues, about various crazy ideas that if they actually happen could change lots. And I'm surprised that particular thing wasn't in that book. The book was, I'll find it in a minute. I'll figure it out.
Yeah, just because there's so much going on with the crazy weather right now, and then here's this crazy wild idea of how to work against climate change. And then the third one I'll bring up was the one trophic cascade, about the reintroduction of gray wolves to Yellowstone, because it just brought out how essential every single little part of the ecosystem is. And the way it goes both ways. One thing goes extinct and how it affects the ecosystem in a negative way, but here's a reintroduction of gray wolves and how that totally revitalized that whole ecosystem. with all the other animals and all the other things that changed, that one thing changed so much for the better. And I thought that was very cool. There was something on Nova or Nature or something, I think last year, about the reintroduction of beavers to a certain part of Canada and how that changed the direction of all these different little rivers and streams, and how that, again, same thing, it regenerated this whole area. So I thought that was very cool.
And kind of, Diane, the converse of that was this, and now I don't remember which story it is, but I think it was a woman who wrote, but the author was writing about looking out their window and seeing all these little animals, an animal running by, and then another, like a hedgehog, and then a rabbit, and then a whatever. And they went outside to investigate, and here a whole area of bramble and what looked like junky land was being torn down for building, but in
For a
reality,
parking lot, probably.
yeah, and that was home to all sorts of, to a whole ecosystem of animals that had to find somewhere, and insects and birds that had to find somewhere else to go.
Yeah, in a hurry, unfortunately. Yeah, that was a really great piece. Because it started in such a benign way. You think, oh, that's interesting that wildlife is going by her window. And then, okay. Next person, anybody want to, Robert?
Yeah, I'll offer a couple of thoughts. I actually was gifted this book a few weeks before I was aware that it was part of this book club. And so I thought, what a coincidence. This maybe is a sign that I must read this book right now. I think what I appreciated the most about this book was the curation of these stories. I was very unexpected, this particular collection, to find this in one book. Part of it was because it is a combination of art and science, so it's kind of all over the board that way, and I really enjoyed sort of the dimensionality of that. But also, you'd notice that, I mean, the trees were sometimes central to the story, and sometimes they weren't at all. And I really loved that. I loved that sometimes it was just about wood, or sometimes it was about the animals that lived in and around trees. And so to me, every time I came upon a new story, it was like unexpected and unpredictable. So I really appreciated the curation of these stories. I guess too that I sort of dog ear the ones that I knew I wanted to go back to, and there's about a dozen of them. But two that I really, really like. One is, and they're by writers that I was unfamiliar with. So one is Liberty Trees by Robert Sullivan.
That was a great piece. Yeah.
171. Yeah, amazing story. And the way that he brings in American history. I'm not necessarily an aficionado of American history, but this, changed that for me. And I just love the role that the tree played in all these historic aspects. But the thing that really blew my mind about this particular story was the way it ended, and the way he went to Boston to sort of find the place where the tree stood, and in that place it was a manhole, but he had to see it. Traffic was coming, and he was he had to leave and catch a plane. And so when he went back, he wasn't sure that he saw the spot. When he went back years later, that manhole was tarred over. And that was such a surprise ending. And I just really appreciated the way he sort of spun that story and brought it to that conclusion. And then the other one I really enjoyed was
Robert,
yeah.
just a second. I just wanted to, the great thing about that was the very end, he says that he said it would take some time. I'm waiting for him to get back to me, and I'm hopeful. I feel as if the tree is still there, one way or another, maybe a plaque waiting to be exhumed from the tar. And
Yeah.
anyway, in the city, we always manage to work things out.
I love that.
Yeah, that's so good.
I know it's a trumpeting the urban environment, you know, in a book about trees. I just really appreciated that. And then the story called "They Carry Us With Them: The Great Tree Migration" on page 245 by Chelsea Steinauer Scudder. Again, a writer I wasn't familiar with, but I guess the theme I'm realizing here is unpredictability, because we rarely think about trees as migrating, right? And I just love the way this writer sort of zooms us out into geologic time. I mean, basically redefines a time frame for us. And now we see trees as mobile. And I just thought that was just such a beautiful way to think about trees as living creatures that have occupied this planet far longer than us, and undoubtedly will outlive us. So that was very, very cool. And then I just have to make a nod. I'm a graphic designer, so I have to make a nod to the typeface that was designed with trees. I thought that was just such a beautiful underpinning to this whole book. And
I knew you'd love that. I knew that.
yeah, absolutely. And my favorite spread in this book is page 132 and 133. And I'm going to hold this up because I mentioned I dog ear the pages. And so when you do that, you get this little echo of the drawing up here in the corner of the opposing page. So that's a great composition as far as I'm concerned.
All right, I have to reveal something, which is that I've known Robert for many, many, many years, and he designed the posters for my theater company here in Chicago for many, many, many years. Beautiful, beautiful designs. But he also designed the Read in Utopia
I was just gonna hold that up.
books.
Oops,
Yeah,
this one.
with the
logo.
That's Robert designed our logo. And so I knew he would be drawn to this book.
So,
No pun intended.
Yeah.
so I want to know, was it James who gifted you the book, Robert?
It actually was not.
Give him a book if my life depended on it.
He wouldn't. See all those books behind me? Those are all from James.
But let me just piggyback on your "They Carry Us With Them," the Great Tree Migration, because I had read a bit about it before, but I thought it was so beautiful, and I think that graphic is really beautiful on page 249.
Yeah,
but
one of my favorites.
Yeah, but the last paragraph of that is just, what do these changes to our forests mean? What are the trees taking with them, and what is arriving in their wake? What is the relationship between the trees' migration and the ecological systems and human communities that they are leaving behind? What does the movement of these beings reflect back to us in the present and foreshadow for the future? And then the last two questions are, how do we bear witness? How do we bid farewell? Yeah, it's just really, because when I was a young school teacher in Colorado,
That line kind of freaked
what? Oops, somebody.
me. Didn't the "How do we bid farewell"? Did you read that?
Wait, you broke up, Terry.
Oh, sorry about that. And I think I interrupted you too. I'm sorry, James. Why don't you finish and then I'll. No, I was just going to say that line, how do we bid farewell? I remember reading that and getting kind of like a sick feeling. Like, is it a done deal that we are bidding farewell? Sorry to interrupt.
I'm not sure. I guess I took it more positively, but maybe that's just my non-cynical nature. I mean, I took it to mean literally some of the trees, some of our environment that we've known for a long time, if we've lived in the same place, might be migrating, and how how do we wish them well and thank
Okay, I prefer that interpretation.
but then, you know, my mother always taught me the glass is half full, but I said, no, it's not. Look, it's only like 4 drops in it. And her response was always, she was Irish. She's like, shut up, you know, so that's, but I do think that when I was a young school teacher in Colorado, the forests in the fall, you know, you give these massive hillsides of these spruce and pine, mostly pine, and with the occasional screaming yellow aspen in the middle. And now, you know, on thousands of mountains in Colorado, all those pines are dead. You know, through various means, but most of it climate change. And so, you know, something's going to end up replacing those. And I do think it is, you know, as the birds move further, you know, as everything keeps moving, looking for a way to protect themselves, they bring things with them, and then new things begin. I remember being in Yellowstone the year after the massive fire in '88, and I was just amazed a year later how much was already growing up. You know, it's pretty astonishing. You know, as hard as we try to completely destroy everything, we simply can't do it. And that's hopeful. One last thing about, and then I'm going to shut up because it's already 6:30. We are thinking, you know, because we when we went to the Winter Institute, Melanie and I, there was a thing where you could get your bookstore in the, you know, in the alphabet of the tree alphabet. And so they sent us a poster of that Nancy actually put in the thing that I wrote. Yeah, so we're thinking about selling, don't take this the wrong way, Robert, selling a second book bag as well, with if we can get the rights to it, with Arcadia Books spelled out in trees. And I think, you know, then having the two beautiful book bags would really be a nice thing. But who knows, they may say no. Okay,
One can never have too many book bags.
that's true. And probably in this room alone there are 20. Okay, who's next? All right, Larry, talk.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to agree with the comments of the design of the book, the illustrations, the alphabet, and all that. I thought was really wonderful. In terms of the content of the book, I guess I was 50-50. I loved about half of it. And then I'd read something and I'm like, this is the same editor who picked this wonderful thing and now they picked this other one. But anyway, I liked it more than I liked it. But I'm with Al. My favorite section was the one on speaking of nature. And I want to share my two favorite parts of that. The first, as someone who tried to teach middle school students for 30 years grammar, which is pretty much impossible, other than they did like Schoolhouse Rock. I love this part where she said, I want to suggest we can begin to mend that rift with pronouns. As a recalcitrant student of the formalities of writing, I never would have imagined that I would one day be advocating for grammar as a tool of the revolution. So that should be on a Butner shirt, grammar as a tool for the revolution. And then her conclusion, because I love the idea of introducing new pronouns to the world, but given a lot of people in the world cannot seem to handle the new use of the pronouns they and their, I think she's going to have an uphill battle to get many people to use the he and the kin. But I thought her concluding paragraph was really good, where she said, thankfully, human history is marked by an ever-expanding recognition of personhood from the time when Aboriginals were not seen as human, when slaves were counted as 3/5 of a person, and when a woman was worth less than a man. Language, personhood, and politics have always been linked to human rights. Will we have the wisdom to expand the circle yet again? Naming is the beginning of justice. And given the current political climate, I thought that was impressively hopeful. But if you look at the big picture of human history, even though at times it seems we're moving backward, you have to say we're moving forward more. And so that was my favorite part.
Larry, what page was that quote?
Just a second. It is
19 to 20.
It starts on 219, it finishes on 220. And anyway, I found that chapter very exciting because when I went to UW almost 50 years ago, the big thing they were teaching the English teachers was transformational grammar, which was like the secret code underneath grammar. And I thought, wow, this is really going to revolutionize things. And that was the last time I ever heard of transformational grammar. It never came up again.
Start the revolution without me.
But I did not believe in diagramming sentences. So I was radical because I didn't do that.
Okay, the Smiths we haven't heard from.
Okay. All right, I was going to come back to the discussion on tree migration, only as I looked at that, I have 2 pecan trees out in my orchard, and they came up to Illinois by the Indians trading nuts, and nuts fell out of the canoes, landed on the river, and then some of them actually survived. And so there's this northern variety of pecan, which I'm now trying to introduce into Wisconsin. And it's taken me about 10 years to get them up to another 5 years before I'll probably see nuts on them. But it's just nurturing them that way. But the whole history of the travel by canoe up to Illinois, and then the ones that would survive being picked up and going from there, just as fascinating. So that made the whole discussion of the travel interesting to me.
Oh, that's great. Oh, cool.
I just want to say it was very nice to accidentally run into the Smiths at APC. And I can confirm they do have bodies that go with their heads, because I wasn't sure until I ran into them.
I know.
2 plays in a row.
Yeah, none of us, I see Larry in the store about once every 3 months or so, but that's it, you know. Some of you I know, but not others. Anything else from the Smiths?
Well, I was very struck, I guess, by the after, I don't know if it was actually the afterword, but the ending piece that the author wrote of her, I think. And, yeah, she did call it the afterword. Another world is possible. And of course, it obviously these afterwards are supposed to tie everything together. But it really sort of made me stop and think that one of the things she's really focusing on is trees as sentient beings. And, you know, now I think sometime last year it was Norway or Sweden just decided that octopus were sentient beings. And so just this concept of the trees also being in that category was just sort of astounding. And yet I could kind of sense it. They're there, they're present, they're long lived, they're huge, they tower over us. And so her notion of trying to make these into sentient beings was interesting to me, and I was engaged by her afterward.
Oh, right. Yeah, I was too. That she just has that one beautiful quote, which has the alphabet above it, from Susan Simard, who was the scientist from Canada who first discovered and was, of course, ridiculed for years before everybody else finally realized she was right. But how the trees communicate via their root systems, and that they communicate in all sorts of ways. And then Richard Powers, God bless him,
Right.
took her science and her person, turned her into a fictional character in the Overstory, and her story in the Overstory is absolutely astonishing. So if you haven't read, those of you who have not read the Overstory, I rarely say this, but I think you should be sure to read it. It's an essential book. Some people, like Dwight Garner of the New York Times, get a little tired of Richard's proselytizing, but it's a really remarkable book. I remember reading it about 6 months before it came out, and when I finished it, I just sort of put the book down and looked at it, and then I just thought, God, I mean, because I loved Richard Powers, and I just thought, this is like Richard Powers 60 times more potent than he'd ever been before. It's a very long book, but it reads quickly, and there are things in it you'll just never forget. But her, his falling in love with what she was talking about, and then fictionalizing her, commingling her with these other stories, was just a brilliant idea. And I'm going to have to go in a few minutes, but one of the things I just loved, and it has really almost nothing to anything, is Katie Patterson's little 2-paragraph thing about the future library. It's on page 169, because I happen to know that the first author who participated in the future library was Margaret Atwood, and she's finished her book, which is now in this hermetically, or as Johnny Carson would say, hermetically sealed in a mayonnaise jar and kept on Funkin' Wagnall's back porch. But that's a joke that only those of you who are my age will get. But although in this crowd, that's one of the few times that my jokes actually land. But it's yeah, I love that idea that they're going to put these books. No one will have read what anybody wrote, and then in 100 years they'll bring all the books out and people will read them. And that's about as great a gift about both forest and paper and words as that I can imagine.
So James and Nancy, can we pre-order those books now? That's a joke. For 100 years from now.
Oh yeah, yes.
Pre-order them.
Yes.
100
before
years
they
from
come
now.
out.
Arcadia is taking orders. Get you now, right?
Prepay, please.
Yeah. Okay. Oh God, the dog is having a hemorrhage here. Okay, I guess it's time for me to go. Great to see you all. Thanks, Robert. That's for Robert's first time. He's that's good. Come back soon. And Nancy, I'll talk to you. And so Nancy, you got the next 2 weeks, next 2 months ready?
I do.
Okay.
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 Thank
Keep
you,
talking.
James.
See
Have
you.
fun at your show.
Bye-bye.
All right. So August, we are going to read Killers of the Flower Moon. And I know some of you have this or have read it already, because I think it came out in maybe 2015 or so. But this is the story of the beginning of the FBI. So what has happened is that after the Native Americans were pushed farther and farther west, settled in is it Oklahoma, and then they discover there's oil on their property, on their land. So of course, you know what's going to happen. So these people are killed. The government gets involved to see who's doing the killing, and that is what started the FBI to be a federal detective agency of sorts. So, and we picked this one because we were like, well, we'll do a paperback this time. And this one's going to get getting so much hype because it's going to be a movie in the fall with Robert De Niro, who's the bad guy, and Leonardo DiCaprio. And so it's supposed to be fantastic. I think it's Scorsese is the director. So, those are good names. So probably going to be a good movie. So read the book first. And then David Gran, I don't know if any of you have read The Wager. That's a new book. But he's a fantastic writer, right? Historical events, but he writes like a fiction writer. So you're gonna blow through it because it's very entertaining, like Eric Larson or somebody like that. Okay. Oh, so that is August 16th. And you're not going to believe this, but we even know what the next month is. It's going to be Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. So this book doesn't come out until August. I have a galley. That's my mind's paper. Your hardcover will be much prettier than this, I'm sure. So Tom Lake, and we thought this would be a fun one because it has tie-in with Our Town, which is one of the shows at APT this fall, or this year. So this one is going to be September 20th. So, and actually these books, I think it comes out August 1st. We're a little concerned because UPS is threatening to go on strike, the drivers and workers are. So hopefully the publisher will send these books all to us like right now so we can get these for you. So Killers of the Flower Moon for August, and Tom Lake by Ann Patchett for September. And even though I haven't read this yet, and I don't think James has finished it, but it's Ann Patchett. So we're like, yeah, it's a pretty good gamble. It's going to be good. So that is that. And I happen to know for some of you that do the audiobooks or through Libro, this one, oh, what's her name? She's okay. She's a pretty good actress. Meryl Streep reads the audiobook. So, so we got good stuff coming up. So we will see you on August, what did I tell you? 16th for Killers of the Flower Moon. And maybe we'll see somebody in the store if you're going to the shows or coming up to visit. So thank you all for joining us, and delightful.
Did we skip Bonnie
Oh, Bonnie, I'm sorry.
in talking about her favorite story?
Oh, I'll just, thanks, Mary Pat. I'll just very briefly, about 10 years ago, we had a huge elm tree that succumbed to Dutch elm, and it had to be cut down. And you know, so these 4 or 5 guys came, and I think it was a couple days process, and they, you know, they do what they do. They climb up, they chop. And there was one man, maybe he was the head worker, as that tree came down, and as they cut it into pieces, he's talking about, listen to the tree. And there was sifting and like the sky, and he was really moved, saddened by it. And this course, the elm stand on page 59 about the tree that really didn't need to be cut down at the university. And you know, how the woodworker, the lumberjack, how said it didn't need to be cut down. Anyway, that particular writing struck me because I could identify with it so much. And then, you know, and in person, when I had the one man who was cutting down that tree so seriously, it was more than just a job. You know, he almost had tears when he died. Meanwhile, the other guys are kind of goofing around and doing whatever they do. But he and I looked at each other, and I saw a tree in a different way. So, anyway, things. I thought, oh, well, and anyway, and I appreciate everyone sharing their thoughts about all, because I skipped around. I didn't just read the book, and now I'm encouraged to go back and read it because I didn't. Thank you.
All right, that was a great way to end our conversation. So thank you.
Nancy, I don't think you shared your favorite part.
Oh, you know why? Because apparently Mary Pat and I are simpatico because, or maybe it was Dan. I liked the one with the arc, the acts of restorative kindness. I thought that was great. That was the one about the fox running and the hedgehogs running away from the house lot being cleared. I thought that was great and inspirational. And of course, I always love Ross Gay. So when I was reading the part where he was listing off all his favorite trees, and I was thinking about some of my favorite trees or trees that I've always loved. And you know, the probably the most powerful one is seeing the tree in at the World Trade Center that survived. You know, they took it away and kept it healthy and then brought it back. So that's a kind of an amazing tree to see. And then, you know, just childhood, my own personal